start recording. All right, when I get home, I'll adjust the setting for the future. Okay, today's daf is daf Chav Hey as we slowly make our way towards the end of Hilchos Avelos. We have today is, Sunday, and we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Chav Ches is Wednesday, and then Thursday is Chav Tes. Chav Tes, I don't like to take days off. So I feel like we should do something. We're gonna have already finished the daf Wednesday, so we'll have to figure out what we're gonna do. Maybe we'll get a hakdama to chagiga, or internet connection is unstable. Either way, we'll figure it out. Okay. Rabbi, you shutting lights off? You just shut our lights off. There we go. Okay, we're holding by the Mishnah on Daf Chav Dalet and Beis on the bottom, 2 lines from the bottom. How you doing, Rabbi?
Yeah, the lights over there. It's dark.
No, I mean these lights here. I mean, I think we're okay.
We're tired.
With the Mishnah?
We are holding a Chav Dalet and Beis in the Mishnah, yeah. Today's going to discuss mostly the halachas of Hesped, and not even the halachas of Hesped, but just it's going to give some examples of Hespedim that were given. It's going to talk a little bit about Kriya.
So hard.
What's that?
Doesn't sound so hard.
Well, maybe the Gemara is not hard, but the Hesped's hard.
Yeah.
I went on the next day and a half. I did it on my own.
So here you go.
I could share yesterday.
So why don't you
Whoa.
please do us a favor, yeah?
Oh, wow.
Okay, all right. Let's start with the Mishnah.
Go for it.
I did the whole thing.
Chav Dalet and Beis in the bottom, 2 lines from the bottom.
Right.
Okay. So the Mishnah says like this: Ein korin v'lo cholzin ve'ein mavrin. So a couple of quick things. Kriya, we know, we're talking about tearing Kriya. Cholzin here, normally chalitza means chalitza like yibum. But here, chalitza actually is referring to when one tears. So there was a certain hanhaga we came across already a couple of times about the way they would tear, they would open and reveal their shoulder. So cholzin was that type of kriya. So not only kriya, the regular kriya, but even the chalitza, where they would reveal their shoulder like that. Yeah, okay, that's a nice picture. Now, ve'ein mavrin. What's mavrin? Mavrin is referring to a sudas havara.
149.
Amen.
Right, so Mavrin here is referring to, there's a Suda, this is actually, we pass on this we are Noyeg. When a person becomes novel, so the first day, is Machlokes Rishonim whether it's all of the meals of the first day or only the very first meal. The halacha comes from a pasuk in Yechezkel, which we've seen earlier. Yechezkel was told by Hashem not to eat from the food of other people, and we understand that to be an exception to the normal rule of a novel, which is that he's not allowed to eat from his own food. He must eat from the food of others. So the first meal needs to be prepared by those that are by other people. It shouldn't be his own food. It should be sort of like it's a type of nechama that we provide to the avel.
I mean, if his wife's food is also.
Yeah, it's supposed to be other people.
Yeah, that's why people buy food.
Yeah. Now, generally, they're buying food usually for the whole week, and they go beyond. But Me'ikar Hadin, one is required for the first meal on that day. It's usually the day when the kavura happens, and it's the first day of Avelos. It's called the Sudas Havara. Now, the Sudas Havara is specifically for the Avel. Other people that are around them are not chayiv to do that. So the Mishnah here there's a couple of different ways to read the Mishnah. I'm going to read it the simplest way. Many Rishonim learn this Mishnah is talking about on Chalamayim, but we're just going to keep it nice and simple. We're going to understand it a little bit more pashut. So it says in the Mishnah, Ein koirin v'lo cholzin ve'ein mavrin, meaning to say, those 3 things, there's no chiyuv to do those things. Ela krevel shel meis. The only people who have a chiyuv to do that are the 7 people who have the relationship with the meis. Meaning, one could read the Mishnah differently and say what the Mishnah is saying is that on Chalam, when there's generally a tendency to sort of limit the amount of mourning one does, the only people who are even allowed to do these things would be the Krov of Shalmeis. And then the entire Gemara is talking about Chalamayim, but we're going to keep it talking about just nice and simple, regular. So Ein Kairin V'loi Cholzin Ve'ein Mavrin Ela Krov Shalmeis. So the 7, right? Mom, dad, brother, sister, son, daughter, and spouse. The ein mavrin ela al mita skufa. Here also, what it means is that the Ovel himself has done kefiyas amita. That's where he's turned over his bed, so he is allowed to do kefiyas amita. But the people that are with him, the ein mavrin, Rashi says menachmin, right? Yoshvin menachmin, right? They could sit on a regular normal chair while they're having this sudas
So we're
havor.
learning it simple without.
It just makes things a little bit simpler, just to sort of read the Gemara. I mean, it could be learned the other way also. It's not that complicated. It's just I want to. The point is that nowhere in the entire Gemara is Chalamayat at all mentioned. And so as you're reading the Gemara, it becomes a little bit more complicated, I think, to explain that. Either way, so the Gemara is trying to figure out what's really being stated here. We're basically limiting the chiyuv of all of the savelos to a specific, to the specific krov mace. So we're trying to figure out what exactly the scenario that we're discussing over here asks. V'afilu chacham, are we saying the din of the mission is true even if the person that has died is a Talmud chacham? That can't be. Hatanya, Zabraisa, chacham shemes, when a chacham dies, hakol kroivav, everyone is his relative. Ask the Gemara, hakol kroivav zal kadaitach. What do you mean everyone's his relative? He has relatives and those other people are not his relatives. Gemara says no, ella hakol kikroivav. Everyone is treated like his kroivim in the sense that hakol kairin alav, everyone does kriya. So you see, what's the question? The question is that the Mishnah is just stating a generic statement that seems to imply that everyone's included, even a chacham. So the Gemara says, no, okay, first the explanation is that our Mishnah is not talking about a chacham, so there would not be any requirement for anyone other than the 7 people that are the krovim to do these things. The Gemara says, V'i adam kasher, who finds, so he's not a Talmud chacham, but at least we got to assume we're talking about an Adam Kasher, who in Shulchan Aruch talks about an Adam Kasher, a person who's not Chayshish on Aveira, a person who's Shayef L'mitzvahs, he's a Chashav person. He's not saying, Shev Shmaitza Shiurim, but he's a good person, a person who does mitzvahs, a person who's a Shayef L'dvar Hashem. Either way, so Ibi Adam Kasher, who Chiyuv and Michayev L'mikra, we also need to tear kriya even beyond just the regular 7 relatives. Everyone has to tear kriya when you're talking about an Adam Kasher. What's the reason why Nebuch people lose their children at a young age? In order to make them yivkev yisabel in the future, meaning in order to get them to cry and mourn over the loss of an Adam Kasher. Ask the Gemara, yivkev yisabel, are you telling me your voina koshakal mine, that it's like a Kadosh Baruch who takes like a deposit from a person, he takes his life, he takes his little kids from him in order to force him to be in a state that he'll cry over the loss of an Adam Kasher? That makes no sense. It's going in the past. Since you didn't cry and you didn't mourn al Adam Kasher, therefore you lose your, meaning if you didn't show the proper respect to an Adam Kasher who died by mourning that loss, meaning you are okay with a loss that wasn't necessary, so to speak. Meaning if you're not acknowledging the loss of a great thing, then you don't get to have great things. That's sort of the midah keneged midah, right? Shechol haboicha u'misabel al Adam Kasher, because we see a person who cries and mourns over an Adam Kasher, a good person, moichlin loy al kol avonos, of a person gets all of his averas removed, bishvil kavod she'asloi, for this kavod that he did to him in that he mourned his loss. So the Gemara is asking, an Adam Kasher, much more common than a Talmud Chacham. Are you telling me that the Mishnah is also not talking about him? Where it says, yeah, the lav Adam Kasher. So again, another scenario where we would all be now. Rishonim do speak out here that when you're talking about an Adam Kasher is someone who, it's not the same like a Talmud Chacham that you have to tear kriya and do all these things. The Talmud Chacham would be, no matter at what point after you find out that he's passed, as long as I think it's within the Shiva period, you would tear kriya. Whereas with an Adam Kasher, it's only talking about from the time of the Kvura from the time of the Misa until the time of the Kvura. From the time of the Misa until the time of the Kvura, then you'd take Kriya. But once the Kvura happens, then for Adam Kasher, you don't.
So if I don't cry over an Adam Kasher, Hashem's going to take my kids.
It's crazy.
I think it's
he said Moshe's point. Not even take your kids, but the averas that you do would, of course, your kids. That would have been forgiven if you would have.
Exactly right. Meaning, since Hashem.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here it says you.
No, go ahead.
Death of your children.
But read later.
What's he done? Right. Okay. Yeah, the earlier one.
So in terms of the Gemara's understanding of the Mishnah we're trying to figure out what is it really stating? It's stating that only these 7 people have a chiyuv to tear kriya and do these other things.
Not a person.
So it's not a Talmud Chacham. Okay, it's not an Adam. So who are we talking about in the Mishnah? The Gemara says in either koi hasam mishas yitzias neshama, and if you're talking about a scenario where the Mishnah is saying that the reason why you were there, so then Fred the Gemara, chiyuv and mechayev, everyone's going to be chayev, right? Either koi hasam mishas yitzias neshama, chiyuv and mechayev, everyone's chayev to do that if you're there. The Tanya Reb Shimon ben Elazar Aimer ha'omer ala meis mishas yitzias neshama. If you're in the room, which is considered a very chashuv thing, to be in the room. Again, you shouldn't be going around to try to find rooms where people are dying, but I'm saying to be in the room with the Shas Tziyus Neshama is a tremendous covet of the mace, to be there while his Neshama is gone, and to acknowledge it. Chayav Likroa, so such a person who's in the room is chayav to do kriya. So Lamazet Daima, what would it be similar to a person watching? A person would be L'Sefer Torah Shenisraf, right? Shechayav Likroa, just like a Torah that was once kosher and was once filled with great things, even though it's now no longer capable of being used. If you see it being burnt, never chas v'sholom, the person would have a tremendous amount of yagon and tsar over this and suffering over it. To see a person die is something that a person has to acknowledge. The loss of that is like the loss of a sefer Torah. They also bring from the Farshim, they say another mashal for the Torah, which is the same way you show a kavod for a Torah that has become puzzle. So too, when a person dies, so his body, which was the vessel that once held the neshama, which now no longer has the neshama, a person has to show kavod in the same way that the Torah has that kavod. Even though the Torah can't be lain from, you can't use it. We still put it in the aron or rebury it or whatever it is. But either way, so the question is are you telling me that we're not even talking about a scenario where he wasn't there? And Moshe says, yeah, the loy koi hasam b'shat tziyas neshama. So Lamaisa, what are we saying in the Mishnah? We're talking about a regular person. The only person who has a chiyuv are these 7 people. But in a chanami, if you'd be talking about any of these other situations, then there would be an expanded chiyuv. Now, again, there's a chiyuv, and then there's whether one's allowed to. So that's already a shaila in the Rishonim, is if you don't have a chiyuv to tear kriya, the pashtus is you're not allowed to tear kriya, because it's baltashkus on the clothing. So you have to sort of work out. I think that's one of the reasons why the Rishonim are pushed to discuss this Mishnah as talking about Chol Hamoed, because it sort of complicates matters. Exactly what is the point of this Mishnah? It's telling me something I didn't know, that you have to tear kriya. I mean, so therefore, by saying it's talking about Chol Hamoed already, then it's a chiddush. What you're saying is that despite the fact that in Chol Hamoed we try to restrict avelos, you can be nayeg avelos, but only if you're the karav, and that you're allowed to be nayeg are kriya and the suda savara, maybe not all of the other things that we discussed. But either way, it continues the Gemara. Ki nachnafshe de Rav Safra. When Rav Safra died, loy kar rabbanon alei. The rabbis didn't tear kriya. Meaning, again, it says chacham shemeis. They should have torn kriya, right? And Amri, and they said the reason why we didn't tear is because like Garmina Mine, we never learned from him. He was, he was in Navardik, and we were in Slobodka. We never learned from him in yeshiva. Amalu Abaye said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Mitanya harav shemes." Did it say your Rebbe died? That's when you tear kriya? No, it says chacham shemes Tanya. He was a Talmud chacham, whether you were gyrus from him or not, it doesn't matter. And not only that, you think you didn't learn from him? What are you talking about? Kol yoyma shmatase pepumen bebei midrasha. Whether you realize it or not, their statements, everything they've said was being quoted all day in the base medrash. So I never learned from Reb Chaim Soloveitchik because I never met him. What do you mean? People are talking about this chakira, that chakira, the whole limud. So they said, all right, what are we supposed to do? You're right, we should have torn kriya, but it's too late. What are we supposed to do now? We didn't tear kriya when we heard about it. Abaye says, the Bryce says, Chacham calls man shoiskin behesped chayav on the kriya. As long as they're doing the hesped, they're eulogizing him, you still can do the kriya. So since over lemikra la'alta, they said, oh, if that's the case, then let's just do the kriya right now, even before the hesped started. He says, no, Abaye, Tanya, another Bryce, Chacham kivoide behesped. The right time to do the kriya for the loss of a tam chacham is behesped, and the Mefarshim speak out. It's because if you don't have a personal relationship with someone, so tearing kriya is not a very obvious thing, right? Meaning tearing kriya over the loss of a relationship, one of the 7 relationships, it's a visceral reaction, right? Meaning that's the understanding of what tearing kriya is. A person is so overwhelmed with grief and loss and shock over the loss of this person that they don't feel like a mensch. They want to tear their kriya as a sign of that outward expression. With a Talmud Chacham, it's a bigger covet to hear more about him, to hear more about the Torah that he spoke, to hear more about it, because that's how you connect to him. So to hear his Torah and to hear other chashuv people talking about him brings a person to a higher madrega of a higher level of feeling that loss. And so therefore the right time to do it is during during the hesped.
So you do it at like the Levaya, right?
Yeah. But now again, nowadays, generally speaking, although it's when Rav Yosef passed away, if you would have been at the Levaya, I wasn't there, but I heard stories that all the Bnei Sfarad, everyone was toward Korea.
Wow.
I don't think the Ashkenaz of Eltu, I don't think we do that.
We don't do this.
No.
Why?
No, 100% sure. Kinach Nafshe de Rav Huna, when Rav Huna passed away, we've seen Rav Huna so many times. He was rich, he was poor, he was big, he was small. So Tosfos points out over here, there's a lot of different Rav Hunas, because we're going to see in a moment that Rav Huna here is dying after Rav Chia, but Tosfos brings rise from other places that Rav Huna died before Rav Chia, so you have to know which Rav Huna this is. But either way, Kinach Nafshe de Rav Huna, Savar la'asuve sefer Torah apuria, they thought to say, maybe perhaps it would be a covet to Rav Huna to take the beer, what do they call it? That's like the platform that they would take the Aron out in. They thought to maybe put a Sefer Torah on that same platform with him. Why? And Rashi says here, a nice thing. He says it's based on what they did by Chizkiyahu HaMelech, that the loimer kiyam zeh mashakasa b'zeh, as almost as if to say, put a Sefer Torah on this near the Aron to say this person in the Aron kept everything that's in this Torah, meaning to. But then when it says Amar Lahu Rav Chizda, who was a Talmud of Rav Huna, said, a contemporary, but he says, Milsa de Bechaye loy svirle hashta leikum le'ovid le. You're going to tell me something that even during his life he would have said, no, don't do that. Now you're telling me in death that's not a covenant. He said to him, the Omer of Tachlifa said, Anach zisila Rav Huna. I once saw Rav Huna, the boy lemesav apor you. He wanted to lie down on a bed, a couch, or whatever. I have a monach Sefer Torah, but there's a Sefer Torah on this. Apparently, he just had Sefer Torah lying around in his house. Right? The kaf kada a'ara, so he took a crate or a barrel or a jug or something and turned it over on the upside down. And he put the Sefer Torah on it in order to free up the bed to lie down. So what do you see? You see, he obviously did not feel comfortable sitting on the same. And that's how the Allah is you're not supposed to sit on a chair. Let's say, for instance, that. Like, in the old Cadillac days when the chairs were just, straight across. If you had Svarim in your car, you had to be careful. You had to take the Sefer, you have to put it on something else because you're sitting on the same level with Svarim. It's not so. Although poskim do talk about, is it true that the same halacha would apply to like a bound Sefer versus, let's say, is it only specifically Sefer Torah, Sefer Nach, scrolled up? But we're nayig nowadays Isser that you shouldn't sit on the same level with, besides not putting it on the floor, but you shouldn't. There's all different shilas. They say, what if it's like a platform that people can walk on? They don't walk on it normally. Different discussions. Either way. So loy have enofik purya mibav. So now Rav Huna's body is in the Aron on the beer, and it was a wide platform, and they're trying to get out a narrow door, so it didn't fit. Saver l'shil shulei derech gagan. So they thought maybe we could lower it from the roof down. Gemara says, Amar lahu Rav Chizda, no. Hagimirna mine. We learned. Chacham kivoyde derech Pesach. Needs to be taken out the door. You don't lower him down like a piano.
I thought this was funny that they're actually lowering the body with ropes outside the window.
I got to get the body out. So then they thought maybe we'll go from this wider platform into like a more narrow beer platform, which will now be able to get out the doors. And they said, no, we learned it's better that he stay in the bed that he died in, or the bed that he's in the first time. There's a related halacha, which is when a person dies and you're in the room. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure the halacha is that when someone dies, you're not supposed to move the body right away. You're supposed to sort of not touch the body, let the body sit for a little bit. I know you're supposed to have
you close your eyes.
You close the eyes. You put them on the floor. Some people have a minute to pour some water.
Close the eyes on the floor.
And then they say you're supposed to have the feet facing the door if possible, which may not be possible in a hospital room. You're supposed to light a candle.
But they used to call it straight after he died. We took out the tubes and we took him started working on it.
I saw my father.
I don't remember.
Remember something about maybe the arm hanging off the bed. They tell you to move something under the arm.
Set on the floor, like my brother. Picture him now.
They tell you to open the door, open a window, or something.
Steps, I don't know. Remember I called? Yeah, I don't know.
Either way, so it says over here, Chacham Kfaydu b'mit Rishonos. They're trying to figure out how to get Rav Huna out of the house. Yeah, the Amar of Yehuda. It's also why Amar Rav Minayin lechacham shechfaydu b'mit Rishonos. Remember the pasuk says, "V'yirkivu es Aaron elokim al egel chadash." Okay, so no, the pasuk says that that it's talking about by David HaMelech and the Plishtim. They brought an Aaron. Whatever. The point is, the way Rashi understands the pasuk, the Gemara is saying that they reused the same platform for the Sefer Torah. So too, so you learn from there that a person needs to be kept on the same first beer that he was on. So the Gemara says, so how did they solve the problem? Paras Bava V'Afkua, they broke through the wall and they broke the door down and they got Ravun out.
I didn't understand. I went through Shmuel, right? I found a Navi and I found this section, and I didn't really understand it.
The pasuk Pshat and the pasuk is not what the Gemara is saying. The pasuk Pshat and the pasuk, it's talking about entirely. Yeah,
So how do they make this correlation?
It's a pasuk. It's an asmachta. It's honestly Rashi sort of works it through a little bit, but it's not the pasuk.
Because I remember looking at my daughter. I said, we were invited.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now.
Huh? Who you learn with? Which guy?
Oh, he learned over Shabbos.
With Hadari yesterday.
Wow.
I
Finished a blot and a half with her
yesterday. I did the whole.
Yeah, can I know? So Pasach Alei Reb Avo. So we're still holding about Rav Huna. So Pasach Alei Reb Avo. He wanted to speak in Hesped. Roy Hoya Rebbeinu Shedish Olav Shechina. Rav Huna was so chashuv that he could have had the Shechina on him. Elish Bavel Garmelei. But because he was out of Eretz Yisrael and he was in Chutz La'aretz.
It sounds a great day.
Yeah, that's an Eretz Yisrael Torah. Yeah, so Shabavel Garmelei. So Moshe Rav Nachman Bar Chizli says, "What are you talking about? Amri Lo Rav Chanan Bar Chizli. What are you talking about? You can't have a Shechina on you if you're outside of Eretz Yisrael." The pasuk says, I think it's Yecheskel. Where is it? Yeah. It's Yecheskel, right? Hayoy Hoyo Dovar Hashem El Yecheskel Ben Buzi Akoyim Be'Eretz Kazdim. Eretz Kazdim is in Bavel. So you see that Yecheskel Hanavi had a Kadosh Baruch Hu give him nevuah when he was outside of Eretz Yisrael. So what are you telling me over here that Rav Huna couldn't have Shechina because of Bavel? If that's the whole reason, how do you could have? So Gemara says, no. Tafach Le Avua Besandalei. So different house over here. His father, when he born here, he asked this question, smacked him with the shoe, or he kicked him under the table, whatever he did. He said, "Stop asking you foolish questions. What are you bothering people with your little questions over here? I mean, you're making things complicated. My hava, what is it? What my hayo? What does it mean when the pasuk says hayo? Shahaya kvar, and here Rashi brings them three different shittas. Other Rishonim have other. We'll say it pashut. Maybe what it's saying is that Yechezkel was giving over the nevuah in Bavel, but he didn't receive it in Bavel. He received it in Eretz Yisrael. Who says that the nevuah came to him when he was in Bavel? Maybe he came to him when he was in Eretz Yisrael, and he's saying it over when he was in Ur Kaz, in Kazdim. Rashi says other pshatim. It just means that maybe it was a Hiras Shah, that was a unique scenario where only once it happened, but really generally not. Different malachim. But the point is your question's not a good question. To me, the answers are not so good. To me, I like the guy's question a lot more than I like the answer. I don't know why he kicked him under the table. It's a pretty good question. But either way, ki askua lahasam here to Eretz Yisrael. If you take a look, Rashi says a very nice thing here. Ki askua lahasam le'eretz Yisrael lekavro, to bring him to Eretz Yisrael to bury him. Shekol han harsham nikvar below chet. A person who is buried in Eretz Yisrael is buried without chet. That somehow by going to Eretz, so it's a Gemara Ksubas. It's maybe a Gemara Ksubas. Nikvar below chet. But either way, ki askua lahasam, when they brought him to Eretz Yisrael, Amr leila Rav Ami Ravasi. They told Rav Ami and Ravasi that Rav Huna's here. Rav Huna's coming. Now they didn't realize that he was dead. They thought he was alive. So they're like, so
they thought it was a different Rav Huna.
Could be. Amru said, Ki Avin and Hassam, when we were by them, right, when we came to Bavel, he was so chashuv that we couldn't even lift our heads near him, meaning that's a chashuv. And you're telling us, Hashta Asina and Hacha, now that he's coming to us, we're supposed to go chase him, meaning to say, Asubas, it's not a covet to them, not to the people chasing him. It's not a covet to Rav Huna. Rav Huna, when we would visit there, we were nothings in his eyes, and he didn't even notice us. Now he's coming here. We're the people who have to go be mechabed him. You can't find bigger people to go be mechabed Rav Huna. They just come to the town.
So it wasn't like they were annoyed.
No. They were saying, you're gonna put me on the dais. You got Rosh Hashivas over here, and you got some, So they said, no. Amrlei Aronoba. No, you think he's alive, and you're showing no. His Aron has come, and you have to go out to greet him. So they went out to greet him, meaning now that they realized that to show coverage. However, Rabbi Ila and Rabbi Chanina loy nafak, they didn't go out to greet him. There are those that say no. Rabbi Ila nafak, Rabbi Chanina loy nafak. But either way, the point is, some of them went out to greet the Aron, and some didn't. The nafak my time, the people who went out, what's their reasoning for why they went? The Tanya, the Brisa says, Aron ha'oyrim makom makom. Whenever you have a person who's dead in an aron passing from one place to the other, I'm them all of Beshura. You're supposed to stand in two lines and sort of like similar to what happens by the cemetery. You do the birchas avelim and the baruch tayanas and all that, and you say divrei tanchumin of Amokim Menachem and all that. However, so therefore they went out. It's a brisa that says you're supposed to do that. However, the ones who didn't go out to loin off my time, why didn't they go out? So they have a brisa also. The Tanya Arain Ha'ivra b'Mokum l'Mokum Einom Lo B'Shura. You don't do it. We'll see in a second. So how do you explain the fact that you have two prices like this? Like kasha, kansha sholdai kayemes, kansha ain sholdai kayemes. Normally, sholdai is like a spine, but really what we mean to say over here is you have to understand they're traveling from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. It takes like 2 weeks or something like that, according to the Gemara says in many places. The way they're traveling could take longer. So you're dealing with refrigeration over here, so the body has to be inside the aron to at least try to limit as much decomposition as much as possible. So the halacha is like this: if the body has decomposed more, right, then that's a sign that it's been a longer period of time. So if there's more decomposition, a longer time has passed. The more time has passed, the less of a requirement there is to go out and be menachem or to go show signs of avelus. Whereas if it's much closer to the time the body has passed, the person has passed, then you're more of a requirement. So therefore, the two brises is being explained as one brise is talking about where much time has passed because the body is decomposed, no, it's passed. Whereas if the body hasn't decomposed much, you do have a requirement to go out, and that's in the brises. But that doesn't explain what's going on here because you're using each of these two brises to explain the actions of two people on the same misa of Rav Huna, and it can't be that decomposed and didn't decompose. So how do you fit the two? But Rav Huna showed the Kayem Tav, the Gemara says. So therefore, the people who went to make sense because it was his body was still very much intact. It had not shown any decomposition. So the ones who went out make a lot of sense. The ones who didn't go out doesn't make a lot of sense. Ask the Gemara, why did they not go out? Because they didn't really get the good information. Meaning they thought it was a decomposed body, and therefore they didn't go out, but they didn't. Rav Huna, right? They say that I forget where the story was, but there was a certain person where they had to rebury him, and so they opened it up. They saw that there was very little decomposition. It sounds like, I forget the exact story. They say with the Baba Sali. I forget, what the story is. But the point is it seems like Rav Huna, despite the fact that it was a couple weeks or whatever it was, when he arrived there was very little decomposition. They had assumed, of course, there's a lot of decomposition, so therefore we don't have to go out. Turns out there wasn't, and they should have fought.
That's because he was such a chashuba.
Yeah, let's say, I mean that his body didn't deteriorate as much, decompose as quickly. I don't know. Amri Heichen Inchet said, okay, where are we going to bury Rav Huna? What are we supposed to do? Rav Huna Ribetz Torah Yisrael. They said Rav Huna was Marbetz Torah. He taught Torah everywhere, right? We know that Rav Huna was in Eretz Yisrael and Babel. Rabbi Chia Ribetz Torah Yisrael, and also Rabbi Chia, who is we learned the other day the the half uncle of Rav through his mother and through his father. Right, so Rabbi Chia was the same person who taught Torah in Eretz Yisrael and taught Torah in Babel. So it makes sense to go bury Rav Huna near Rabbi Chia in the same, let's say, cave where they're buried because they're very similar in that way. So the Gemara says, Man Ma'ale, who's going to be the one who's going to go take him in to bury him?
Or Amarayim, weren't they?
Yeah, or Amarayim.
When did Tanaim?
Although close to Tanaim, Rabbi Chia.
How do you know? You know the order?
Of who?
Who's the last Tana? Tana's other Mishnayos, right?
Have you put on us?
And Rav Chia is Rav Zanko, Rav Tan Power.
Yeah, it's right around the turn of the Tanaim into the Amarayim.
Right, because Rav was the beginning, right?
Rav was the last one?
And Rav Huna was
Rav is the beginning. Rav is the beginning.
Rav is the Tana who public.
So he's the Tan. So he's close to Tan, I'm assuming, and he's close to Tan. Rav Chia was his uncle. So Rav Chia was closer to Tan.
But there's Amarayim.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's similar to like Rav Yosef Karo, like Rishon, Achron. The Ran lived, 80 years before him. Ran's a Rishon.
It's a Rishon.
Art school is a Rishon.
First edition, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
So Man Maile, who's going to be the one who takes him to bury him? Rav Chaga said, I'll do it. And we'll see in a moment exactly why that was a big deal, because not everyone wanted to do this for reasons we'll see in a moment. He says, because I'm a big Talmud Chacham, I already knew all the Torah when I was 18 years old. Or someone's explained what he means is the Ukimta L'Talmudai. L'Talmudai is my own Torah. But it could be it's referring to the Torah of Reb Chia or the Torah of Rav Huna. But either way, I'm the one who should do it. I never saw carry in my life. Umashmale kameh, and I served either Rav Huna or Rav Chia, it's not clear. V'yadi be'uvdei, I know all of his maisim, I know all of the chashuv things that he's done. The yoyim echad, there was one day, his hapichale ritzua the tefillin, and his halachah mashmisina, the black of the tefillin straps needs to be facing outwards. You shouldn't have it flipped around where the lighter color side is showing. So therefore, he saw that his tefillin had become reversed and it was facing out the other way. V'yosef Allah arba'in ta'nisa, he fasted for 40 days. I mean, which is insane.
Just for the.
I mean, I sometimes thought every day. That would be a good way to lose some weight, I think, if I just started fasting for 40 days. All right. So either way, he brought him into the cave to bury him. So Yehuda, who was the son of Rav Chia, and Chizkiah, the other son. So Chizkiah and Yehuda were the two sons, and they were buried to the right and to the left of Rav Chia. Amr le Yehuda lechizkiah.
They were buried.
They were buried. They're dead. They're 100% dead. Yeah. Okay. So Amr le Yehuda lechizkiah. Well, we'll see in a moment that other things are going on in this cave that are Amr le Yehuda lechizkiah. So Yehuda's kever says to Chizkiah's kever, "Kum miduchtech, get out of here and make some room for Rav Huna. The lav oirach ara de koyim Rav Huna. We shouldn't have to make Rav Huna wait." Bahadi de koyim, and in that moment while they were delayed. Come bahadei amuda de noiro, a pillar of fire shot out from the spot that Yehuda was in, or Chizkiah was in, then when he moved his kever, whatever that means. And Chazia Rav Chaga saw this, and Ivoyas, and he became very scared. Obviously, he didn't want to get burned by the fire. So he took Rav Huna's aron and stood it upright. The nofak also, and he got the heck out of Dodge. He was very scared of the fire. And why did it? And here it's also we should discuss what exactly we're saying here. Why was he not punished? Meaning, why was Rav Chaga not punished for leaving Rav Huna's aron standing up straight? And this is how the Rishonim explain it, which is very hard to read. The next line is Mishum de Zakve la'aron de Rav Huna, because he stood it up straight, which is a hard read. But the Pashtus is maybe Bahai Deloye Anish, meaning that. And why didn't he get burned? He didn't get burned because he stood up the aron, and the aron protected him from the fire.
No.
Either way, Kinoch Nash Chizdas, his Kedusha protected him from the fire. Kinoch Nash the Chizdas Avalos of Sefer Torah Purye, same thing. They wanted to put a Sefer Torah on Chizdas beer. Amarlu Rabbi Yitzchak Milsa the Rabbi like severely on Anekim David. Do the same thing to him, what he didn't want to have done in his life, right? Meaning we don't have to. Story. Apparently, the story here is obvious what the story was before. We thought that maybe we shouldn't even be allowed to stitch up the creek. No, Chacham Kivan Sheichzir Pnei Machare Amita. Once a Talmud Chacham dies, once you turn away from the Talmud Chacham, from the Mita, the beer that he's on, Shailin, you'd be allowed to do it. But Shailin is not a complete fixing; it's just a slight fine. Rabbi Bar Rav Huna and Rav Hamnuna, two great Talmidei Chachamim, when they passed, Askinu lahasam, they were being taken to Eretz Yisrael. Kimotu agishra, they got to a bridge that only one could pass by, not two. Kamu gamle, the camel stopped. Amrluhu ahutaya, I guess there was a certain Arab, Bedouin or whatever it was, who was either trying to pass or maybe he was traveling. He says, "What's going on here? Why are the camels not going?" My high. Why have they stopped? Amrulay, Rabbanon de Ka'avdi Kara Adadi. Each one of Rav Hamnuna and Rabbi Bar Huna are arguing over who should let the other one go first. I guess these same Kvarim that were inside the cave that were talking to each other, now they're talking to each other before they get to the kever, saying Mar Amar Mar Nail Beresh or Mar Amar Mar Nail Beresh. Each one saying the other one should go first. Omar, the Arab Bedouin says, Dinahu de Rabbi Bar Huna Leil Beresha. I hold Halacha L'maisa, Rabbi Bar Huna should go first. And it could be he was just saying, I don't care, just go. I want to get out of here. I got business to do. Choliv Gamle de Rabbi Bar Huna, and so sure enough, Rabbi Bar Huna, they listened to him, and Rabbi Bar Huna's went first. And sure enough, for this person, this Arab Bedouin, for showing disrespect to Rav Hamnuna, Nosser Kache V'Shinei De'ahutaya, his teeth. This maybe explains why Arabs have terrible teeth. His molars and his teeth fell out, and fine. So the basic point is, for showing a disrespect to Rav Hamnuna by having Rav Bar Huna go first, his teeth fell out, and therefore that was how he was punished.
To see what the Yaakov says about that.
Well, Mr. Hashem, you guys, when you do it with the rabbi, you figure it out. Pasach Aleahu Yenuka. So once Once they got there, so now we're going to have a couple of hespedim over here. Pasak alehu Yenuka, a certain young person who was very a good bal hesped, got up to speak about Rabbi Bar Huna and Rav Hamnuna. Geza, like a what's a good English word for geza there?
Trunk?
Trunk. Yeah, it's
No, I'm not sure. I don't know.
yeah, it's a line. It's a tree line. Like a roots. Geza Yeshishim, an old line. Olami Babel. This is referring to Rabbi Bar Huna. He was a great person, the son of a great person. So he was a great line, meaning he had long family history of Talmud Chacham. The Imai Sefer Milchamas, and along with him Rav Hamnuna, who was a Sefer Milchamas, a book of war, meaning a book of war, the Milchamta Shel Torah, Milchamas Hashem, right? Ka'as Kipod Huchbalu. These are different types of birds of prey. I think they're signs of the Churban, basically. Lirais b'shoid v'shever haba mishinar, to see the destruction and the ruin that comes from Babel. Meaning, of these two great Talmid Chacham that are now have died, we see the destruction that's come out of Babel. Ketzaf al aloma, Hashem's anger was on his world. V'chamas mimenu nefashos, and he therefore took from the world the great neshamas. V'samach bahem kikala chadash, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was besimcha with these two Talmid Chachamim, like he would be with his new bride. Roichev Arabas Hashem, who rides on high. Sasa Sameach is happy. B'boy love nefesh naki v'tzadik. Okay, so that was the first on Rav Hamnuna and Rabbi Bar Huna. Okay, nach nafshe de Ravina. When Ravina died, pasach aleahu saptana, another saptan got up. These were very good saptanim. Timorim hiniu rosh, date trees, palm trees, hang your head in sadness. Al tzadik ketamer, on this tzadik who is like a tamer, like tzadik ketamer yifrach, right? Nasim leilois kiyamim, let make our nights like our days, or our days like our nights, and crying and mourning. Al meisim leilos kiyamim, on these people who make their nights like their days and their days like their nights and learn limit Torah. Amalei Ravashi le Bar Kipuk. Rav Ashi said to Bar Kipuk was one of the professional eulogizers. Hahu yoima my amris, on the day, and here there's also a discussion: is Rav Ashi referring to his own death, or is he referring to the death of Ravina? That's not clear. Hahu yoima my amris, on the day of we'll go with on the day of Ravina's death. Yeah, on the day of Ravina's death, what will you be saying? Amar Lei, he said, Amina, I'll say the following: Im be'arazim nafla shal heves. If on the cedar tree fell a fire, meaning the great cedar, a thick tree, ma ya'asu ezove kir. What will the small little branch of a hyssop do? Basically the vines on the wall, they're for sure going to be burnt up. Leviasa, on a great big fish, v'chaka hualu, was hooked like someone threw a line in the water and was able to pull up the leviasan with a hook. Ma yasu dagi rakak. What are the little sardines going to be able to do? The little tiny fish. I mean, they're for sure going to get taken up. Benachal shotef, when you have a flowing river, nafla chaka became dry. Ma yasu me gabim. What are the little tiny puddles going to do? Which doesn't sound like a very nice thing. If he's talking about Ravina, he's saying Ravina was great. He was what I'm going to say on the day that he dies is that he's the great big flowing water. You're a puddle. What am I going to say? Rav Ashi didn't like this too much. Yeah. So either way, Amrle Bar Oven said to Bar Kipuk, I guess it was competition. He was the other professional eulogizer in the neighborhood, and he says, "Chas v'shalom dechaka v'shalheves mitzdike amina." How are you going to refer to the Ravina and say that he's going to be caught with a hook, or that he's going to have a what do you call it? What was it? Flame. Thank you very much. He's going to get burnt up. All right. He says, "Umay amers." Okay, so what are you going to say when Ravina passes? So he says, "No, I'm going to say the following: Amina bechula avalim, cry for the avelim, the mourners who are left, the loyla aveda, and not for the person who's died. Why? Shehila menucha, the person who's dying gets to go be with Hashem. So don't cry over him, but rather cry over the rest of us who are losing him. Va'onu la'anacha, and we'll be mourning the loss. We'll be moaning that loss." And either way, this way or that way, Cholosh Daite Alai, Rav Ashi was unhappy with either one of these future. He went in and he said, "Listen, I'm going to pay you to say some eulogies. Tell me, what are you going to say? Rabbi, I'm paying you a couple of dollars over here to say a eulogy. I want to know what you're going to say. I don't like what you're saying. Either you're calling me a little fish, or you're calling me a little puddle, right? Or you're saying that you're not even going to cry over the loss of Ravina, whatever it is. He doesn't like it. He's out. Because of this disrespect, he showed Rav Ashi, their feet, both of them, became deformed. Their feet became crooked or something. Hahu yoima, and on that day, in this scenario when Ravina passed, They obviously were not hired, so they didn't go say the hesped. And this is like what Rav Ashi said, bar kiputz chalitz v'loy bar oven chalitz, that when, and I'm not sure if bar kipuk and bar oven, when they died, did they leave no children? But what he's basically saying is that since we know that when a person dies with no children and his brother has to do yibum, the mitzvah of marrying the wife to provide the next generation of children, if he leaves no children, he has to do yibum. Let's say the husband does not want to be with the wife, the new wife, he does chalitza, meaning she takes off his shoe, spits in the shoe, but that's only if he can shoe off his foot. He's got a crooked foot, you can't do chalitza, right? Meaning not easy to do. So that's what Rav Ashi is saying. You're never going to do chalitza, and you're never going to do chalitza, meaning because of this terrible thing you did, he showed me disrespect.
Where's Gemara?
Yeah, not an easy one. Rava ki have osele digeles, when he got to the Tigris River, Amr Leila Bar Oven, he said to Bar Oven, maybe Bar Oven was in a wheelchair or something. He said to Bar Oven, Kum Eimam, actually no, this would have been before, right? Rav Ashi was after Rava, so could be the story happened a little after. Rava ki have osele digeles, Amr Leila Bar Oven.
Yeah.
What's that? What do you got?
When he died, I'm going to say the world lost him.
The world will always have simcha, but there will be a definite loss.
I wish I was Bama eulogies. It's so much fun.
Kum Eima Milsa.
Did you do my eulogy?
Remember
fun.
you had a red cat who came to the shul?
Yeah.
Remember him?
I remember, yeah, I remember, yeah.
He was, his whole thing was with your eulogy.
Yeah.
You should live the way you're going to speak about it.
Rabbi,
I
you
feel
gonna
like
do
this is a
mine?
great shiur.
Okay, let's finish
Rabbi,
off the
you gonna do
Gemara.
mine?
Gosh, guys.
That's very. We're already learning the parak. We don't have to.
These are my kids.
We don't have to go back. We don't have to be machmir. Rava ki have also ledigelis, when he got to the Tigris River, Amar Lo Bar Av, and he said to this eulogizer, who obviously was a good with his words. He says, "We're by the digelis. It's flowing. We're nervous. We're going to drown. We might be drowning over here." He says, "Kum Eima Milsa. Maybe get up and say a shtickle tayr over here. Say some tefillah to Hashem to get us out of this mess." So Kaiba Amri got up and said, "Bayu Roiv Shlishis b'mayim." He was talking about Rava, and Shlishis is referring to Klal Yisrael. He says, you have over here, you have Rov Shlishis. You have a majority of Klal Yisrael represented in Rava. Godless of Rava represented so much of Klal Yisrael, and he's coming in the water now, meaning we're in the river. Zocher v'rachem, remember and provide mercy, right? Have rachamim on us. To'inu me'achrecha, that despite the fact that we've strayed from your path, ki isha mibaylo, like a woman who has strayed, like a saita, al taznichenu ke'ois, don't leave us, ke'os meimara, like the sign that would happen when the sota is provided. Well, we're learning the parak that's about depression. Mr. Shem.
Man,
Death and eulogy.
I think these guys should be more happy.
Well, they're in the river. They're about to die from drowning. So he's asking the daven for him. And apparently they got out of it. He says, "Don't bury us here in the water, like the way, just like the sota's water is there to show that she maybe did something wrong and therefore she's going to die. Don't let our averas, our leaving you, be. Don't let the water that we're going to drown in." I think Gemara says a simon of we're basically from here to the end of the Yomad, at the end of the Daf. We're going to mention all of the different hispadim that were said about the following Chanan, Yochanan, and Zera, all these different people. The Gemara says like this: Rabbi Chanan chasne de Beinesiah have. He was the son-in-law of the Beinesiah. Loi kahavele bani, didn't have any children. Loi rachmi daven to Kadosh Baruch Hu to have children. V'havele hu yoyma, and the day that he had a child, the Havele noch nafshe, passed away. Pasach lehu saptana, and a certain eulogizer got up and said that the hesped simcha l'toiga nehafacha, that happiness became sorrow. Sasan v'yavaku, that happiness and suffering became attached, meaning obviously the two, one happy thing, one sad thing. Ve'esim chasei na'nach, the moment of his happiness, he sighed. Ve'es chaninasai, in the moment that he was provided with a son, of it chaninai, his own existence was taken away. Asiku le Chanan al Shmei, and therefore they called the son Chanan, named after his father. Kinach nafshe the Rabbi Yochanan passed Paschal Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. Kasha hayom Yisrael ki yom ba Hashem b'tzarayim. Today is difficult to the Jews, like the day when the sun comes in the middle of noon. You have to know the pasuk that we're about to quote, the whole pasuk. It's a much longer pasuk. The chsiv haya b'yom hahu v'hevesi Hashem b'tzarayim. But the pasuk continues and talks, and it's a pasuk in Amos, talks about all these terrible things that are going to happen on that day. And the point is that the sun is referencing a Talmud Chacham, and just like the sun was lost on that day, so too a Talmud Chacham. Remember, Yochanan said, Yoshio, this is where the pasuk over there is referring to Yoshio HaMelech, who was a great tzaddik, and therefore it was considered a very day. On that same day, Yosef Reb Ami Shiva Ushloshim. Reb Ami Shiva, and he kept Shloshim, even though he was a Talmud Chacham, wasn't a family member. Amar Reb Ava Breda Reb Chia Bar Ava Reb the Ovid Legarme who the Ovid. He did this, but it was not required. Dahachim Reb Chia Bar Ava Reb Yochanan Afilu Rabbi Shalim Dachach. Even your Rebbe that taught you Torah, Eina Yoshev Lo Liyamecha. You only sit Shiva only for one day.
You do sit for your Rebbe.
Yeah.
If you taught you, yeah, but only for one day. Kinuch Nafshi the Reb Zera, when Reb Zera passed, Pasach
People
Alei.
practice that now. People sit their Rebbe.
So I saw somebody.
I mean, you have to have a very close relationship.
Yeah, that's what I'm with.
Except nowadays, no, we don't.
I saw somebody.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier from when Ravad Yosef died, pretty much every Sephardi who lived in Eretz Yisrael.
Is that true for that?
I don't know if it's that Shiva, they tore Kriya. I shouldn't say everyone, but I mean, pictures. You look at the pictures of the either Kinuch Nafshi the Reb Zera Pasach Alei who Sabdana Eretz Shinar Harav Yolda. We're talking here about Reb Zera who lived both in Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, right? So Eretz Shinar Bavel Harav Yolda birthed him. He was born in Bavel. Eretz Tzvi, which is Eretz Yisrael, Gidla Shueha, grew him. Oin Allah Nabach Oivavoy Amra Rakas came up. I think was that in Tainus. Rakas is referring to Tiberius. Ki of the Kleichim Dasa, the dearest vessel has been lost. Ki Nachnavshi the Rebavo passed. Achisu Amudi the Case Rimaya. So he lived in Caesarea. So a pillar of water cried over him. The pillar of the town spit out water, almost as if to say it was crying over the loss of Ravo. When Rabbi Yossi passed, Shafu Marzeve, the Tzipuri Doma, the gutters of the city were filled with blood. The Rabbi Yaakov, this isn't going to get happier. Don't expect it. The Rabbi Yaakov, when Rabbi Yaakov passed, Aschemiu Koichve Biyamama, you were able to see the stars by day. When Rabbi Asi passed, the Akru called Ilnia, all the trees became uprooted. The Rabbi Chia, when Rabbi Chia passed, Nechisu Kipi the Noira Mirikia, firestones fell from the sky. When the Rabbi Yossi died, Ishtou Tzalmanya, the statues' faces became smooth. The Havala Machlitzaya, like the way it would with like a hand tool, like a trowel that you would use to smooth out, when you butter the tile. Yeah. The Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chia, when he passed, Iskatzitzu Kol Andretaya, all of the statues of the king were mutilated. I'm not sure if this was like a pulling down the Confederate flag type stuff, or if it was just a miracle. But either way, people were so taken with their Avelis that they rioted. Yeah. The Rebbe Yashav, when Rebbe Yashav died, Ichtaru Shiv'in Machtarta ben Naharda, meaning when he was alive, just him existing kept all of the thieves away. But once he passed, all of the thieves' tunnels were redug. 70 tunnels for the thieves to take stuff. The Rav Hamnuna, when Rav Hamnuna passed, Nechisu Kipi, the Barda Mirikia. Now we're talking about hailstones coming down from the sky. The Rabba Rabbi Yosef, Nosha Kipi, the Prasa Adadi, the bridge or the parts of the bridge collapsed over the Tigris River. The Abayi Varava, when they passed, Nosha Kipi, the Gelas Adadi, the bridge of, the first one was the Euphrates, the Pras, and this one is talking about the Tigris River. They collapsed. Did Abayi and Rava die at the same time? I don't know what this means. Yeah, Kinoch Nafsh did Misharsha would have, this is what you need, Rabbi Loda beer, yeah. Kinoch Nafsh did Misharsha when Rav Misharsha passed, Ta'un Dikli Shitzi, all of the date trees became filled with thorns. Some dapim are.
It's unbelievable.
He likes his words.
Yeah,
He loves it.
you have a deep soul. That's why.
He loves his words. He's so holy.
What do we got here? Let's end this.